Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've not yet subscribed to my channel but love my content, then please do so. Let's get this channel to 20k. Okay, let's now get into today's video. In this video, a man explains how the United States is not Israel's savior but is its worst enemy. In the Muslim and the Arab world, if not the whole world, they sort of have been taking it as a truism for years now that the United States basically serves Israel, that America is controlled by Zionists, and that the US government will do anything, no matter how much it costs, to serve and protect Israel. Now, even a majority of Israelis probably think that way too. He goes on to say that the US does not care about Israel's domestic issues. They don't care about the socio-economic issues, socio-economic concerns that Israelis have, and a lot more. The only thing America is concerned about is continuing the strife and conflict. This is a must watch. So with that said, here is the video.
You know, in the Muslim and the Arab world, we sort of have been taking it as a truism, you know, for years, that the United States basically serves Israel, that America is controlled by Zionists, and that the US government will do anything, no matter how much it costs, to save and protect Israel. I think there's a lot of Israelis who probably think that way too. But an objective, rational assessment of the situation would paint a very different picture. I think Israelis need to recognize, if they don't already, that the United States is not your savior. It's your worst enemy. The US, whether you know it or not, and whether Muslims understand it or not, is actually treating Israel the same way that they treat everyone else, with complete contempt. I mean, look, they are supporting Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the most unpopular, the most despised, the most corrupt, the most incompetent, the most psychopathic, delusional, and despotic ruler that Israel has ever had. And he's responsible for both prolonging and worsening the conflict with the Palestinians. Netanyahu has made a career on diverting attention away from the internal domestic concerns that actually matter to Israeli citizens, that matter the most to Israeli citizens, by endlessly talking about security and the supposed threat that Israel faces. And of course, the domestic problems in Israel just get worse. And the conflict and the security situation actually just gets worse. And America loves it. They don't care about Israel's domestic issues. They don't care about the socioeconomic issues, the socioeconomic concerns that Israelis have, the high cost of living, the disparity between rich and poor. They don't care about corruption in Israeli society, and so on. And these are the, predominantly, these are the issues that matter the most to Israeli citizens, to Israeli voters. But as far as America is concerned, the only thing that matters is continuing the strife and conflict. That's all they care about. They don't care about the welfare and the stability of Israel, the safety of Israeli citizens. You see, Israeli citizens want to treat Israel like an actual country, and they expect it to behave like an actual country. And they think that their lives and their concerns should matter like they would in an actual country. But to the United States, Israel is a policy instrument. So the Israeli population doesn't matter to them. And what matters to the Israeli population doesn't matter to them. The relationship with the United States has been incredibly detrimental to Israel, despite what everyone thinks. It has prevented Israel from becoming a normal society. Now, part of that is driven by by diaspora Jews in the US, who, like most diaspora communities, are generally far more radical and ideological than their people back home. And this diaspora community in the West, particularly in the United States, makes a huge amount of money exploiting Jewish emotional attachment to Israel, you know, getting them to fund pro-Israeli lobbies and so on, which mostly just makes a handful of American Jews very rich. But it's mostly driven by US policy interests and the utility of Israel as a vehicle for an endless flow of cash to American defense companies and as an sort of offshore research and development hub for the Pentagon. The U.S. does not want and has never wanted for Israel to be at peace with their neighbors. They've never wanted Israel to integrate into the region. That's not Israel's function as far as America is concerned. And it doesn't matter to them that this is the only way for Israel to ever actually become a normal society. It doesn't matter if this is in the interests of the Israeli population or not. They don't care. They're using you. They're using you, the Israelis. They're exploiting you. The Americans, the West, are using you. And it's absolutely against the interests of your people. Obviously, the only way for Israel to ever progress as a society is to dislodge themselves from the United States, from the West, and to integrate properly into the region. Until they do that, none of their domestic issues will ever be resolved. They'll never even be addressed. Until they do that, they will never be allowed to do anything but be a policy tool of the U.S. and lose both their lives and their souls in the process. I mean, they're making you do things that are against your beliefs as Jews. They're making you do things that are against your own humanity. They're pushing you to do things that make the world see you as monsters. And more specifically, you're being seen as monsters by the people who are in that part of the world where you are. Properly, Israel should be a global South country. It should be a Middle Eastern country, and it should share the values and the priorities of the global South and the Middle East. But because it was a Western colonialist project from the beginning, and because it continues to operate exclusively as a colonialist project, it is seen as, it is perceived as, and it sees itself as a Western nation. And you're never going to be able to be a normal country going forward like that. The only real way forward is a one-state solution. Incorporate all of the occupied territories and all of the inhabitants of those territories into one country with equal citizenship rights. Yes, that will mean that Israel will have a Palestinian majority and it will no longer be a so-called Jewish state, but it can become a normal, healthy society. I mean, if Zionism means upholding the right of Jews to live in Palestine, well, no one ever said they didn't have that right. No one ever had a problem with that, certainly not the Muslims. But if Zionism means ethnic Jewish supremacy, well, I mean, what civilized person would endorse something like that in the 21st century? There were always Jews in Palestine during the Muslim Empire. And there were Jews in Palestine when the Zionists came, and the Zionists fought against them. But if you want your country to ever be normal, then you're going to have to go back in history and learn from the history of those Palestinian Jews who knew how to get along with their neighbors and who lived peacefully with the Arabs, who lived peacefully with the Palestinians. The Jews who rightly saw the Zionists as colonizers and as people who disrupted their society, because those same Zionists and that same ideology is disrupting your society today. The Israelis can't possibly like being the way their country is now. There's no way they like that. They're human beings, hate Netanyahu, and most of them blame the government for what's going on right now, and rightly so. But look how opposed that is to the American narrative. You know, look at how at odds the American narrative is from the way Israelis themselves feel, the Western narrative. You need to stop letting America talk for you. They're destroying you. The perspective of the average Israeli is diametrically the opposite of what the Americans are saying. I mean, look at those kids at the rave when the Hamas attack happened. And remember that military service is compulsory in Israel. So that means that all of those kids at that rave were IDF soldiers at one point. And all those kids have military training, but those aren't soldiers. I mean, even the active soldiers of the IDF aren't soldiers. The IDF of 2023 is not the IDF of 1956 or 1967 or even of the 1980s. These people don't want to be warriors. They just want to live their lives. But America won't let them. I mean, look at the Israelis on TikTok or Instagram? What do you think they would rather be doing with their lives? Do you think they have it in them to, that they're so committed to Zionism that they want to dedicate their lives to harsh, stoic drills and training all day, self-sacrifice, discipline, and so on, in order to make Israel a warrior nation? Well, they'd rather be in Dubai. You know it and I know it. If they had a choice between the path that Netanyahu and the United States wants for them, which is the path of endless strife and conflict and bloodshed, if they had a choice between that or following the path of a one-state solution that would flood that country with Gulf investment, Gulf money, and would allow them to just basically lay on the beach all day smoking hashish, what do you think they would prefer? No, Israel has to detach itself from the U.S. They need to start looking to the BRICS nations for diplomatic resolutions and solve these problems together with the global South. And they need to send this message.
Despite political differences that at times strained relations between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. former President Joe Biden, the outbreak of war in Gaza has reaffirmed that the U.S. and Israel remain as tightly knit as ever. In recent days, U.S. officials have reiterated their unwavering support for Israel diplomatically, financially, and militarily. Biden, who has previously criticized Netanyahu's right-wing government, was unequivocal in an address at the White House. "We stand with Israel and we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack." Appearing alongside Netanyahu, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, "You may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never ever have to. We'll always be there by your side." Now, here's a brief history of U.S.-Israel ties. The U.S. supported the creation of a Jewish state after World War II, but in the initial decades of its existence, the bond wasn't particularly remarkable. President John F. Kennedy made it more a point of emphasis, calling it a special relationship, predicted on a shared commitment to Israel's right to exist in peace. In 1962, and the relationship only really began to flourish following the 1967 war. That war saw Israel defeat a coalition of Arab states, suffering comparatively few casualties in the process with little help from outside forces, and occupy swaths of new territory including Gaza and the West Bank. The US had been concerned about Soviet influence in the region and that the conflict could have expanded into a Cold War proxy battle if it had escalated further. But Israel put a quick end to it and made itself an attractive ally at a moment when the US was preoccupied with Vietnam War and did not have the bandwidth to get involved militarily in the Middle East. What's key about the 67 war was Israel defeated the Arabs hands down in 6 days with absolutely no American military assistance, said Joel Bainin, a professor of Middle East history. What that said to the United States was, these guys are good, we're in a mess in Vietnam, let's be connected to them, and things developed gradually over time. At first, the US mostly giving that, also selling weaponry to the Israelis, also as well as allowing them to borrow from US banks at lower than market rates to support development efforts. In the 1980s and 90s, the US and Israel began cooperating on research and development and production of weaponry. And in 1999, as former President Bill Clinton set out to foster lasting peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors, the US signed the first of 3 10-year memorandums committing to provide billions in military aid annually. Now, after terror attacks, that money helped spur advancements in Israel's surveillance technology and signal intelligence, which by the 2000s were at least as good as, and in some cases better than, the United States. In 2011, Israel implemented its Iron Dome, a short-range air missile defense system that uses radar technology to destroy rockets fired by Hamas and other militant groups. The system uses US-constructed parts and is funded in part by the US. Currently, Israel receives $3.8 billion in military aid from from the US annually under a memorandum signed in 2019 that accounted for about 16% of Israel's total military budget in 2022, a significant fraction but not so large that Israel still depends on US aid in the way it once did. Now, this relationship has played a huge part in the advancement of sophistication of the Israeli armed forces, said Michael Hanna, U.S. Director of the International Crisis Group, an organization focused on conflict prevention. Israel's relationship to the U.S. is also unique in the region, and that is demonstrated in the U.S. commitment to maintain Israel's qualitative military aid, which is aimed to guarantee that Israel remains militarily superior to any other regional military. Let's now take a look at some of the comments and hear what others had to say about this video in the comment section. I'm just going to share like 2 to 3 comments because I really want you, my viewers, to share your own thoughts on what you think about this video. So the first comment reads, I think a large portion of Americans than you think are 100% opposed to supporting Israel, so long as they keep oppressing the Palestinians. This man is a genius. Great job. Okay, what do you, my viewers, think about this video? Do you feel what this man is saying is the truth? Do you think that America is Israel's enemy and America is concerned about continuing the strife and the conflict? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section and let's hear what you have to say about this video. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video as I bring you another interesting video. Shalom.